What happens when two artists paint the same location? Today on Zoom, I talk with my friend Scott Christensen. Painting together with a friend can be a great way to learn about art and your art process. Scott lives out west where the scenery is really terrific, and he's a highly accomplished artist that has shown in galleries and museums. So I love to visit when possible and paint together. You'll be interested to know what we decided to select for our scene, compositions that we chose, and different color palettes that we picked. This conversation reveals how artists make decisions and develop their own way of seeing. There's no single correct answer, and instead of comparing, it's more open-ended for interpretation. Scott and I have painted together for years, and even if we are in the same spot and we have the same intention, often our paintings turn out really differently. Let's take a look at some of our examples. Scott, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me. It'll be fun.
Today we're going to talk about one location, two paintings, and how they overlap, but also might be different.
Yeah, we definitely had different approaches. I do it different every time now.
We started out painting the same scene. We both really liked it.
Yeah.
I thought we were doing it with a really different approach and going to come out with a different painting, but in the end, it didn't do that at all. It was more similar than I thought. This was a big surprise for me.
In what way?
I loved that you got there from the gray masses, and I built it painstakingly from these little dots.
Okay.
And was hoping to arrive at something. Sometimes I don't know until it's finished.
Yeah.
And then, okay, I'll just say the unfiltered version, which is you kind of had a brown mess going, and then all of a sudden you had a painting filled with light. And I was like, what? How did you do that?
Yeah. What I realized when I'm outdoors studying is I usually define my idea in my head first. And I definitely didn't know where I was going compositionally. This was just an information color study started, and I thought, where am I going to go with this? I typically have to put words around mine outdoors about where I'm going to go, because sometimes I don't see the good design yet, and I'll just start into painting information,
So were you thinking about that jumble, or were you thinking about the light on the water? What was your first kind of hot take when we rounded the corner?
It's hard to tell now. It looks to me like a
stretch back
really rough idea started, and that's just what some of them are to me, But I think that's the important part for me about outdoors, is to try to look at it objectively and see if you can get it to read, I think yours has way more of a jumping off point as far as composition goes. And I think it's really solid composition. To me, I was going to build on that jumble and see if I could do something with it. I never ended up going any further, but that's typical of me, though, outdoors.
I remember you talking about the warm and cool light. You're like, wow, look at that log. And then actually, if we pan to the photo, it's like, whoa, what a sad thing that is, right? You never glean that. But if you look at this log, you were talking about the reflected light. I think you were working on.
Well, I saw yellows and reds up under the logs, and I was headed for that. And it looks like you got a little bit of that too. Doesn't pick up on the photos at all.
It doesn't. And this is what's interesting is, I feel like I'm all about color. I'm looking for the warm and cool and everything. And I ended up not being able to get there with mine's just kind of gray, scratchy bits.
Yeah.
I kind of went texture. I was actually proud of myself that I got the white glare on the water and saved the light.
Yeah. Well, I could have left it, and that's what we talked about yesterday.
Getting transparent.
Yeah, I got way too opaque too fast with that one for sure.
Do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, it's basically a rough study for me. So I don't have a whole lot more to say about that one.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, what I wanted to ask you was if you ever did anything with that.
No.
No.
I have so many that I don't do anything with. I mean, I really treat outdoors like an experience. So I'm really keenly trying to observe as much as try to make a painting. And oftentimes, if a painting works, it's really great. But most of the time, if I stick with that, what I'll do is I won't overdo it. I feel like it's important to me not to wrestle something to the ground outside. I used to do that all the time, and now I just kind of try to make color notes, and like we were talking about the reflected lights and the colors we're seeing, and what it actually looked like to me. And when I don't feel like I'm getting there, I'll just back off and start again.
Well, you're you're no stranger to painting water. I mean, I see that painting behind you. So doing a
Oh
study
yeah.
like that in the field over all of the years is still going to impact your work one way or the other.
Sure. The studies are important to me for sure, but I oftentimes when I bring them in, I'm reworking them. I'll rekey it, just go, oh, it's redder than that, warmer, darker, lighter, and then try to see the relationship of everything first before I start ever going toward finish. And that's just the important part of study to me is to try to develop the colors or set of colors that best describes the thing I'm seeing. And it's pretty simplified to me outdoors, so I don't try to get into minutia. But big relationships, big masses, even though they're little shapes, they're just shapes related to one another. Yeah. And
So
you go right straight for the guts of the you have a different way of thinking when you start yours. It's pretty emotion based usually, it seems like.
it is. Yeah, in these studies, I went for color and mood more than I did the actual shape of things. I think what happened for me is I was just so excited to be painting together, and you
Yeah,
had locations that you were excited to paint and show
yeah,
me. And
yeah.
I even remember you would pull up and say, there's a painting here somewhere. And I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then you'd say things like, I wanted to paint this for a while. And so I was like so jazzed to paint there when we
right.
finally pulled up. And okay, so full disclosure, some locations I was kind of like, oh, we're painting this. And not because I didn't necessarily like it, but one was basically this sweeping view that I thought, oh my God, how am I going to paint that? Okay, here's one thing that we saw
Oh,
together.
right.
I
Yeah.
remember, you remember that?
A flood of water on the Teton River. Yeah,
And here's the thing, I would have passed this by, but I was
yeah,
excited about the scene because you were excited about the scene.
yeah.
Okay, so before we look at the paintings, what was one of the first things that made you stop and think, yeah, that would be cool to try?
I can tell you that I remember this is the one thing I've noticed about this time of year. Way out there where those cottonwood trees meet the mountains, way out there, back in there, right? What I've noticed is these greens, when they recede, they go redder, as you know. But then they go into this, the shadows get almost ruby violet, which Vassaria makes a color called ruby violet. And it gets like a colder red before it goes to blue.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
describe that for viewers. So you always say yellow gets lost as it goes in the distance. And I remember scribbling that down when I first heard that. But
Yeah.
then it's really good to be there in person and look at it. So you're saying that there was a red back here in the mountain layer or right
No,
in
so
this
like
area?
let's talk about just the shadows. So the bushes in the foreground, the shadows are kind of greener.
These,
They just don't show in this photo, as you know.
right.
And so what happens is the greener shadows gradually yellow drops out and it goes redder. And then way back into the trees, way in the distance, those shadows look like they're violet to me. Not in this photo, of course.
Well,
And
let's look at the art next and we'll see it.
and to me, what this time of year does is I see all kinds of different reds in the distance before blues. Right where the transitions into the mountain, there's a lot of red back in there, and I just don't see them in photos. And as you know, red drops out a lot of photos.
It does. Okay, so here's your red. This is cool.
Wow, you found some of my worst studies, didn't you?
Come on, that's it.
That is terrible. But anyway, that back there, you can see some reds back in there on the mountain. But right back there in the shadows, I usually see a lot more violet, and I did not get any of that in there right there on this one.
Well,
But
okay, but let's talk about that. You don't like that study, but you say the study is just there as a vehicle for being present on location. But I mean, this is from 2017, so that's a
yeah,
long time ago. I still remember this as an important moment. Like I remember this is what plein air does.
yeah,
Painting
yeah,
outside, you remember the day, you remember what you were thinking and feeling because somehow the act of painting locks that
yeah.
in. And you knew right away when you saw that photo what you were drawn to. Whether the study is there or not, that's still going to inform your other paintings. Would you agree?
I would, but what I've noticed when I'm outdoors is that I don't get usually the notes that I really want. Feels like a warm up to me. This one does.
Yeah. Well, we didn't spend that long there. This was mine. It got pretty dark, but I was trying to capture everything, the dark in the foreground,
Yeah.
and all those ins and outs. I liked this kind of map sized shape, so I wanted to show. Well, maybe we don't show this. Maybe we edit this out, but We should say these are just rough studies, but yet it still sparks a memory. And I just
Yeah,
thought it was really fun when we did the same thing. I was
yeah,
painting so quickly. I've enjoyed looking at these photos after the fact.
yeah.
What's your take on these two? Do you remember what we were painting and what the objective was?
Yeah, I think you get the peak of fall that way. The one in the top right of yours, that very top right one, right where the fall color meets that background mountain, there's a lot more red and kind of a violet color back in there. That's what I
Yeah.
see a lot. I see a lot of that out there. Mine turned a little blue in my background there. But those relationships I really pay attention to, especially when I get in. I just respond to it outdoors, sometimes with gouache and oil. I've certainly done better studies than, than the ones I'm seeing here. I have a drawer full of those though, and I think that one
I
disappeared.
think you ended up redoing some of this, but I pulled this up because I didn't really like my own studies also. Okay, this
You
isn't
know,
about making your best art ever. I'm
no,
kind of casting back and thinking, well, first of all, what did I get? Photographs, his and hers. And
yeah,
then I pulled these because I love the compare and contrast that's happening. The texture
okay,
that you achieved, it's just you have a velvety texture. It makes me excited to work
uh,
in gouache. I was trying gouache and I didn't like necessarily what I was doing, but I liked how gouache gave that background violet blue. And I was experimenting with different things. Like you said, this
yeah,
one was more violet blue and this one had more cobalt. And then I tried to
yeah,
push it a little greener. So I was playing around with the blue and gold ratio. And
yeah,
then I see your study, and blue is such a small part. And I thought, oh, well, duh, that actually makes it more impactful. Like you had the gold blizzard of shapes and all of the nuances of gold. So the blue is somehow more precious and really stands out. That compare and contrast of like what you saw versus what I saw. And it's not really about what is good or bad. It's like
right.
I appreciate the scene more by seeing it through your eyes, and it helps me realize how I see it through my eyes.
Right. And I think it's important for people to understand that there's a real emphasis of starting and finishing paintings outdoors. And I'd much rather do a half a dozen of quick starts outside and going, oh, okay, let me adjust that. It's kind of like putting a rough draft down, as bad as it might be.
Yeah.
And that's actually how I treat outdoor painting. And if it comes and it starts going, then I'll really dial in. But for the most part, I'll just load it in a box and call it a start. And that's just what it is. It's just like a start of a rough draft. And then I'll say, okay, now let's really dial in the temperature shifts. And that's what I'll tend to do.
Well, right. It's a point of departure. And Scott, we're
Yeah.
not afraid to show our bad studies here, right? We're not.
Right.
It's
Right.
gonna be okay.
No, I know.
Oh,
I
this
just,
is
get shocked sometimes like, whoa, that's what I did. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what about this one where we were painting that gorge? We were high up on the bluff
Oh,
and
right.
it was
Yeah.
incredibly dramatic. This was a moment where I looked over at what you were doing and I thought, whoa, that's how you do it. Because I felt like you really nailed those blues going in the distance and this pocket shadow that you got of the description of the three-dimensional nature of the land was just really impressive. And you were focusing on that form. And when
Yeah.
I was doing it, I still saw that shape, but see how it's all broken up. And I was looking at these closer
Yeah, but
value.
that violet you have in the middle ground right there is pretty close to exactly what I'm seeing. If you look at the two,
Yeah.
I'm seeing that violety cast, especially on the far left. And I for some reason I have a tough time ever seeing the photographs pick up those violets, and they're in there. They're really strong. They really support the greens, and I think for the most part, when people are painting green, I'm just shocked at
Yeah, that's
the
awesome right there.
need the need for red, and even in the blues that we have, there's still reds in them.
I also,
Um,
speaking of red, I loved that you tucked some red into that tree. Now, if we look at the photo, it's so colossally bad.
yeah, that's really hard to make out, and
It really is. We could see a little glimmer of something happening here. And you had pulled this tree in the midst of everything that was going on. You had pulled this tree out and described that three-dimensional nature of the land, which I thought was so
uh,
great. And that feeling of being up on the bluff.
right,
Good job.
those are yeah, that place is really cool.
It is really cool.
You got the Grand Teton in there too, man.
I know, I was putting it all in. These
Yeah.
were just color dot studies that, oh, this one is terrible. We'll zoom that one out. But this is an example where I'm trying to capture everything. I'm not familiar with the landscape. I'm getting involved with a lot of the texture and also trying to put those reds in their place. I did like some of the things that were happening here, but here's something that was interesting for me. This small study, it almost becomes an abstract collection of color harmonies. And I
Yeah.
really liked what happened with this painting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I used that as kind of an artistic inspiration board for other paintings.
You know, every time we go out, the thing that surprises me most is the volume of work you do. Like you have four of these, well, three, you know, and I'm working on that one, right? And of course we didn't work that long out there and stuff like that. But the point is, you know, doing volume like you're doing and trying to just assimilate your thought process and make sure that it's legible in your head somehow with those little nuancy dots that you're talking about. Those are the information you're looking for.
That's my hook into a scene, to not overthink it, to not panic that I'm painting. I figured that they're color dots.
You know, it's like I'm in a search and I don't know what I'm searching for every time. Sometimes I see the idea, but I can't get it to work, and vice versa, right?
Just being present with your materials. Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of like fishing. You could catch something.
Yeah, you might. You might.
You might. Okay.
Let's just assume that nothing's going to work, and if something does, we'll be happy. You know, that usually works best for us. Usually there's better content when we quit thinking about it.
I hope to invite Scott for a few more art chats. We always get interesting art ideas going. Thanks for making the time. Appreciate it.
You got it. Let's do it again.
All right.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right. See you. Bye.
Do drop a comment below about your experience painting with artist friends. Scott and I both have learning programs online, and you can check out the link to our programs in the pinned comment below.